15-minute lecture series, Anatomy and Physiology, Chapter 2, Chemical Basis of Life, Part 1. Chemistry deals with the composition of matter and how it changes. Matter is broken down into a variety of elements, organized in the lovely periodic table. The atom is the smallest structure that still has the chemical properties of the element, so it is still that element. Here is a table showing us the most common elements in the human body. When you look at a model of an atom, you see that there's a nucleus. In the nucleus is found neutrons, which are neutral in charge, and protons, which are positively charged. In shells outside of the nucleus, you find the electrons, which are spinning around and are negatively charged. When you look at the periodic table, you see what's called the atomic number. Atomic number is the number of protons in that element. So hydrogen has 1 proton. Its atomic number is 1. Helium 2. Lithium 3, and so forth. You also see below that the symbol, the 1 or 2 letter symbol for that element. H for hydrogen, Li for lithium, B for beryllium. So an atom is uncharged because the number of protons, 1, 2, 3, equal the number of electrons, 1, 2, 3 in the case of lithium. Atomic weight is the number of protons plus the number of neutrons. Because electrons are so small, we don't worry about them. So this atom of lithium's atomic weight is 7, and its atomic number is 3. So isotopes are atoms of the same element, have the same chemical properties, but have a different number of neutrons. So for instance, carbon-12 has 6 protons and 6 neutrons. Carbon-13 has 6 protons and 7 neutrons. And carbon-14 has 6 protons and 8 neutrons. Some isotopes are radioactive and unstable, and they break down, and when they break down, they release radiation. If this can be alpha particles, where the isotope loses 2 protons and 2 neutrons, changing it to a different element. It can be beta particles, where the nucleus gives off an electron. That will also change it to a different element. Or it could be gamma radiation, very dangerous. That is just pure energy and doesn't change the element that isotope is. If you have a large block of some radioactive isotope, the half-life is how long it takes for half of it to break down. Radioactive iodine is used, for instance, to treat hyperthyroidism. Iodine accumulates in the thyroid. The radioactive iodine will then break down the tissue, treating the hyperthyroidism, and it has a short half-life, so it should get eliminated quickly. All right, electrons are found in structures or areas called shells. These are sort of a sphere, and each shell can hold a maximum of so many electrons. The first energy shell can hold 2 electrons at most. The second and onward can hold 8 electrons at most. So sodium here has in its third electron shell 1 electron, but it could hold 7 more if somehow able to find them. All right, if you look at the periodic table, not only are things organized by their proton number, their atomic number, but also in rows and columns based on the electrons and electron shells. So the rows tell you how many shells, energy shells, the element has. So hydrogen is in the first row, so it has 1 energy shell. Lithium's in the second row, it has 2 energy shells. Sodium's in the third, so it's 3 energy shells. And then the columns tell you how many electrons are in the outermost shell. So first column, 1 electron in the outermost shell. Second column, 2 electrons in the outermost shell. Third column, 3 electrons in the outermost shell. We're kind of ignoring these for this course. And then finally, the noble gases, which are inert, chemically inert, because they have full outermost energy shells. So the number of electrons in the outermost energy shell is what determines the chemical properties of that element. So here we see, for instance, silicon. Silicon has 14 protons. It has 3, 1, 2, 3 energy shells, and it has 1, 2, 3, 4 electrons in the outermost shell. Now, atoms like to gain or lose electrons to become like the noble gases. And when they do that, they become ions. So for instance, the elements in the first two columns really like to lose electrons. When they lose those outermost electrons, the remaining shell is now full, and they become positively charged ions because there's more protons than electrons. On the other hand, elements further out in columns 6 and 7 tend to like to gain electrons to fill their outermost shell. If they gain electrons, they become negatively charged ions. And then these opposite charged ions become attracted to each other. In electrochemistry, opposite attracts. So this gives us the ability to witness ionic bonding. Ionic bonding, oppositely charged ions attracted to each other and forming a bond. So one atom will give up an electron, the other atom will gain that electron. Sort of like adoption. One gives it up for adoption, the other collects it for adoption. In this case, with sodium and chloride, it gives us a positively charged sodium ion, a negatively charged chloride ion, and this forms sodium chloride, good old table salt. These can then form big crystalline structures, which are amazing to see. There's also covalent bonding. Covalent bonding is where different atoms share electrons to fill their outermost shell. This often occurs in elements found near the middle of the periodic table. So, covalent bond between hydrogens, they will share an electron with each other. This will make a hydrogen molecule. So, two hydrogen molecules, H2 with a single bond, a molecule, two or more atoms bound together. Oxygen also forms bonds with itself, giving us molecular oxygen with two shared electrons, a double bond, and nitrogen will share 3 electrons to get a triple bond. There is no quadruple bond. If the sharing of electrons is evenly shared, then you get nonpolar molecules. So these are all nonpolar molecules. If they were arranged symmetrically, this can also give you a nonpolar molecule. So methane with 1 carbon and 4 hydrogens gives us a nonpolar molecule. However, if the electrons are not shared evenly, then you get a polar molecule. Well, one region, say the oxygen in a water molecule, is slightly negatively charged, and other areas, say the hydrogens in the water molecule, are slightly positively charged. The oxygen is hoarding the electrons. Now, there's also this idea of the hydrogen bond. The hydrogen bond is when the slightly positive hydrogen is forming a weak interaction with a negatively charged oxygen or nitrogen. This is overall weak, so it is not an official strong bond. It can be broken relatively easy. Might be best to think of it as sort of dating. However, if you have enough of these hydrogen bonds in a material, say in water, you can see how attracted they are to each other and how they resist other forces. So, for instance, the reason why water can go above the lip of a glass is because of this hydrogen bonding, trying to hold all those water molecules together. Now, a molecule is 2 or more atoms bound together, ionically or covalently. If you have different elements in a molecule, then it is also called a compound. So methane is a compound, sodium chloride is a compound, but they are also molecules. So here, hydrogen is a molecule, but not a compound. Carbon dioxide is a molecule and a compound. And as you can see here with water molecule, you have 3 atoms in total, 2 hydrogen atoms, 1 oxygen atom, and they are a compound. You can also see these arranged structurally with little lines representing the bonds, so you can actually see double bonds if it's 2 parallel lines. Sometimes there's so many bonds, they'll just show where the carbons are and do little lines between them, so this is a steroid. Chemical reactions is where you have a starting material, and it undergoes the breaking and forming of bonds, chemical reactions to lead to an ending material. So starting material, and the arrow points to the ending or products. Substrates, reactants leading to the products. Substrates or reactants leading to the products. Follow the arrow. So, in this case, we have hydrogen molecules, 2 hydrogen molecules by the big 2 in front of the H2. 4 hydrogen atoms, though, because we have 2 hydrogen molecules, so 1, 2 times 2 is 4. And if we look over here, we also have 4 hydrogen atoms. So you have the same number of atoms of each element on both sides. The breaking of bonds is the breaking between the molecular hydrogen molecules and the molecular oxygen molecules, and then they reform bonds to form the water molecules, H2O. Different kinds of chemical reactions. You have synthesis reactions where the substrates get combined together to form something bigger. Maybe not all of them get put together, but there's something bigger being formed. You have decomposition reactions where the substrate or reactant gets broken down into smaller components. So in this case, sodium chloride put in water will break down into sodium ions and chloride ions. And then there's exchange reactions where parts of one molecule or compound goes to another molecule or compound. Sometimes it's a direct exchange between the two, sometimes not. But in this case, we got hydrochloric acid plus sodium hydroxide yielding the products sodium chloride and water. Here are some examples of decomposition reactions, exchange reactions, and synthesis reactions. Sometimes a reaction is reversible, so basically it can go either direction. Then you'll have an arrow pointing in both ways. So sometimes the products are the reactants and the reactants are the products. A catalyst is a compound, chemical, or maybe even a protein enzyme that will increase the speed of chemical reactions without being used up, so they can catalyze even more reactions. Catalysts are very important biologically. So we have the reactants, and they need to overcome a large amount of activation energy, a really mountain of energy, in order to become the products. This may take days to occur, but if you add the catalyst, this will lower the activation energy, turn that mountain into a speed bump, and now the chemical reaction can occur in seconds. Electrolytes are substances that dissolve in water to produce ions. So basically, sodium chloride is an example of an electrolyte. Acids are also electrolytes. They are electrolytes that release hydrogen ions, and bases are electrolytes that release an ion that can bind to the hydrogen ion. Often, this is hydroxide ion, OH negative. So for instance, sodium hydroxide, when put in water, will give you a sodium ion and a hydroxide ion with a negative charge to that. Often, if you look at a molecule and the hydrogen's on the left side, that means it's going to be part of a base, perhaps a hydroxide. Well, if the hydrogen was on the right side with hydrochloric acid, then it's going to lead to a release of a hydrogen ion. Turns out there's a pH range going from pH 0 to pH 14. The very middle of this is 7. Anything at pH 7 is considered neutral. However, anything that is lower than pH 7 is considered acidic. The lower the number, the more acidic. So you get super acidic. This is because the amount of hydrogen ions present are increasing. You also have above 7. Anything above 7 is considered basic. With the higher the number, the more basic or alkaline that substance is. This is because you get lower and lower concentrations of hydrogen ions, or on the flip side, a higher and higher concentration of hydroxyl ions. And here's some common things that fall on the pH range. There's also chemicals called buffers. Chemicals called buffers are able to combine to excess acids or bases to minimize pH changes. This is very important in our blood because we want homeostasis. We want the blood's pH to resist changes and stay at the ideal levels. All right, that's it for this half of the Chapter 2 lecture series.